I remember the first time I introduced Daniel to my parents. It was a warm Sunday afternoon, the kind of late spring day where everything feels full of hope. We'd driven 2 hours out of the city to my parents' estate, a massive colonial-style home with white columns and freshly trimmed hedges, the type of house that made Daniel feel out of place the moment we pulled into the driveway. "Do I look okay?" he asked, adjusting the collar of his shirt. He'd borrowed a nicer button-up just for this occasion. "You look perfect," I said, kissing his cheek. "They'll love you." I was wrong. From the moment we stepped through the front door, my parents wore tight, polite smiles and masks of civility. My mother, Regina, with her string of pearls and perfumed air kisses, looked Daniel over like she was inspecting a defective product. "So you're the one our daughter's been talking about," she said, her eyes not quite meeting his. My father, Charles Whitman III, didn't even try to pretend. "What do you do again?" he asked, swirling his bourbon. "I'm an EMT," Daniel answered, standing a little straighter. "I work with the city's emergency services." My father grunted. "That must be stressful. Dangerous. And I assume not very lucrative." "Dad," I snapped, trying to cut the tension. But it only got worse over dinner. They asked if he came from a respectable family, how much he earned, whether he owned property, as if my heart was a balance sheet and Daniel was a poor investment. When Daniel talked about the lives he saved, the people he pulled from burning cars or comforted after strokes, my mother sighed and said, "But what's your long-term plan?" That night, Daniel apologized to me in the car. "I don't think they like me." "They don't know you," I whispered. "But they will. Just give them time." But time didn't help. It only made things worse. Our wedding was modest. We paid for it ourselves, no handouts, no strings attached. Daniel's parents flew in from Michigan and cried during the vows. My parents sat stiffly in the front row, lips pursed. My mother wore black. Black. To my wedding. I should have known then. The first year of our marriage was beautiful in all the ways money couldn't buy. We lived in a one-bedroom apartment over a bakery that always smelled like cinnamon. We cooked together. We danced in the kitchen. We saved for our future with every dime Daniel brought home and every freelance gig I landed as a designer. But every phone call from my mother chipped away at that happiness. "How long do you plan on living like this, honey?" she'd ask. "Don't you want more?" "We're fine, Mom." Fine isn't good enough. You used to dream bigger. Then came the comparisons. Your cousin Melanie married a hedge fund manager. They just bought a brownstone in Brooklyn. Good for her. And what do you have? Peeling paint and burnt toast. It wasn't about toast. It was about power. One day, my father showed up unannounced at our apartment. He looked at the cracked walls and mismatched furniture and sighed like he'd just entered a war zone. "This isn't a life for someone like you, Claire," he said. "You were raised with standards." "I'm happy," I said firmly. "No. You're playing house with a man who can't provide. I've spoken to your mother. We want you to move back. It's not too late to start over." It was like they couldn't see Daniel, only his salary. Only his shoes. Only the fact that he didn't own stocks or drive a German car. I told Daniel what they said. He laughed bitterly. "They never wanted us to work, did they?" "They don't know you," I whispered again, but even I was starting to lose conviction. The breaking point came 6 months later. Daniel had just come off a 14-hour shift when he collapsed in the hallway from exhaustion. I held him in my arms, crying, terrified. He refused to go to the hospital, said we couldn't afford the bill. That night, while he slept, I stared at the ceiling and felt the quiet hum of fear. What if he burned out completely? What if he got hurt and we had no savings? What if my parents were right? I hated that the thought crossed my mind. I hated that I couldn't shake it. But worst of all, I hated that my mother called the next morning, and I didn't hang up when she said, "Sweetheart, come home. We'll take care of everything. Just say the word." And in that moment, one weak, terrifying moment, I didn't say no. Daniel didn't notice the change in me at first. How could he? He was always either saving someone else's life or too exhausted to piece together the slow erosion happening between us. I still kissed him in the mornings. I still made him tea before his shifts. But inside, something had cracked. It wasn't love. I still loved him, desperately. But fear had taken root, watered by years of my mother's whispering and my father's glares. I began wondering if love was enough in the real world. Or if I was being naive. That's when the letter arrived. It was delivered by courier, sealed in an expensive white envelope with gold trimming and the Whitman family crest, a lion standing atop a pile of books. My parents had always been theatrical. I opened it on the balcony while Daniel was sleeping off a double shift. Inside was a typed letter, formal, cold, legal. To our daughter Claire Whitman. In light of recent conversations and your ongoing choice of lifestyle, we are offering a one-time opportunity to return to the life you were meant for. Enclosed is a cashier's check for $250,000, sufficient to cover new housing, career reorientation, or personal investment. The terms are simple. You must file for divorce within 30 days. You will cease all contact with Daniel Riley. You will return to the Whitman estate for rehabilitation and long-term planning. Should you accept, the funds are yours, no strings attached beyond the conditions listed above. We await your decision. Charles and Regina Whitman. At the bottom of the envelope was the check. I could barely breathe. $250,000. The amount might as well have been $1 million. It was the kind of money that could erase our debt, give us a down payment, maybe even start our own design firm. It was the kind of money that had never been offered to me without an iron chain attached. This time, the chain was Daniel. I didn't tell him about the letter right away. I stuffed it in the bottom of my dresser drawer, but it burned like a ticking bomb every time I walked past. That weekend, we went to the park. Daniel brought his sketch pad. He liked to draw when he wasn't on duty. He sat under a tree, sketching a little girl chasing bubbles. "You've been quiet lately," he said without looking up. "I'm just tired," I lied. He drew her curls, then paused. "They called again, didn't they?" I didn't answer. "That bad, huh?" I swallowed the lump in my throat. "They sent a letter." He turned to look at me, his eyes serious. "What did it say?" And for the first time in our marriage, I lied. Just more guilt. More disappointment. The usual. I barely slept that night. I kept imagining what $250,000 could mean. My own studio. Health insurance. A way out of this endless tightrope walk between bills and exhaustion. The next morning, I woke up and found Daniel making pancakes in the kitchen, humming softly. "Hey," he said, "I've been thinking." He turned to face me with syrup on his thumb. "What if we moved out of the city?" "What?" "There's a hospital in Vermont that's hiring. Small town. Cheaper rent. Slower pace. I know it's a big change, but maybe we could finally breathe a little." I stared at him. He looked so hopeful. So tired. So utterly unaware that my parents had just offered to rip him out of my life with a checkbook. He reached out and touched my cheek. We could start fresh. Just us. And that's when I started to cry. He looked panicked. "Hey, what's wrong?" "What did I say?" I shook my head, trying to hold it together. "Nothing. I love you so much." Later that week, I met my mother at a cafe near her tailor. She sat at the window sipping chamomile, her pearls catching the morning sun. "You read the letter, I assume." "I did." "And?" I haven't decided. She clucked her tongue. Claire, sweetheart. This isn't a decision. It's an escape hatch. You're drowning, and we're handing you a rope. I'm not drowning, I said quietly. You're lying, she said with a smile. You're a Whitman. You were meant for more. Her hand slid a folder across the table. Inside were real estate listings. Bank accounts in my name I didn't know existed. A brochure for a prestigious design firm open to mentorship opportunities. They'll take you tomorrow, she said. We already spoke to them. I stood up. I haven't agreed to anything. My mother's smile faltered. Then it sharpened. You have until the end of the month. After that, we consider the offer rescinded. And Claire? She looked me dead in the eye. If you choose him, you choose poverty. You choose pain. And don't expect us to pick up the pieces again. Back home, Daniel had cooked dinner, pasta with roasted garlic and spinach. He poured wine. He lit a candle. He didn't know I'd just come from a meeting that would decide the fate of our marriage. That night, he held me close. And all I could think was, what kind of person does this to someone they love? But the question was, which someone did I mean? By the start of the third week, the pressure was no longer a whisper, it was a scream. My mother texted daily. My father sent me a stern letter reminding me that the deadline was approaching. Meanwhile, Daniel remained unaware, planning our possible move to Vermont with innocent hope, like a man rebuilding a home someone else had already set on fire. I woke up in the middle of the night more than once, drenched in sweat, my heart racing. In those moments, I'd stare at Daniel's sleeping face and wonder, what kind of wife lets money tip the scale against love? But guilt is a slow poison. And fear, especially the kind planted by the people who raised you, can grow louder than any vow. It all came to a head one Thursday afternoon. I had just wrapped up a freelance consultation when my phone buzzed. It wasn't my mother. It wasn't my father. It was Daniel. Can you meet me at City Hall? It's important. City Hall? My chest tightened. When I arrived, he was already there, waiting on the steps in his EMT uniform, holding a manila folder and wearing a look I couldn't read. Daniel, I said, walking toward him. What's going on? He looked at me with eyes that were too calm. Too steady. It terrified me. I found the letter, he said softly. The world around us stilled. I was looking for my spare stethoscope in the dresser. I didn't mean to snoop. I found it. I tried to speak, but no words came. I read the whole thing. The check. The conditions. The signatures. He held up the folder. I made a copy for myself. Daniel. He held up his hand, stopping me. I'm not mad, he said. I needed to hear the truth from you. I felt exposed. Ashamed. Like a child caught lying with chocolate on her lips. I didn't take the money, I whispered. But you didn't tear it up either. That silence between us? It was the loudest thing I'd ever heard. We didn't speak much on the way home. That night, Daniel sat across from me at the dinner table, untouched food between us. He finally broke the silence. I always knew they hated me. They don't know you, I said, echoing that broken line. He laughed bitterly. They never wanted to. I reached for his hand. He pulled away. You lied to me, Claire. I was scared. So was I. But I never considered walking away. I didn't. But you thought about it, he said sharply. You thought about trading me for comfort. For their approval. Tears spilled down my cheeks. I love you. I know, he said quietly. But love isn't enough if the foundation's cracked. He stood, walked to the bedroom, and closed the door. The next day, Daniel didn't come home after his shift. I called the hospital. They said he'd left hours ago. I texted. No reply. At 10 p.m., the door opened. He walked in, exhausted, hollow-eyed. He didn't speak. He went to the bedroom and came out holding a stack of papers. I didn't want this, he said. But I'm not going to wait around for you to decide if I'm worth staying poor for. He placed the divorce papers on the coffee table. I didn't sign them. Yet. I'm giving you the choice. My hands trembled. Daniel. He walked to the door. I'll be at my brother's for the weekend. If you want me, burn the papers before I come back. If they're signed and left on the table, I'll understand. He left. And I broke. I stared at the papers for hours. Then I stared at the check. 2 futures. 1 heart. No map. I didn't sleep. I didn't eat. I walked our neighborhood for hours, watching couples holding hands, kids laughing in playgrounds, joggers passing by like they weren't carrying the weight of choosing between love and blood. By Saturday night, I'd made a decision. On Sunday morning, Daniel walked back into our apartment. He froze. The table was empty. The divorce papers, gone. So was the check. In their place was a candle. And a single note. You were never the problem. They were. And now, they're no longer part of this marriage. If you'll still have me, I choose you. Every time. He didn't say anything. He just pulled me into his arms and cried. So did I. But the war wasn't over. Because when my parents found out what I had done, they made sure I would regret it. My parents found out on a Monday. It didn't take long. The Whitmans had always kept tabs on everything. Bank withdrawals, property records, even whispers in the social circles of high society. When I didn't return to the estate and the check wasn't cashed, my mother called me. I didn't answer. Then she called again. And again. On the 3rd attempt, I picked up. Claire. Tell me this is some kind of misunderstanding. I stood in our kitchen, fingers trembling, heart pounding. It's not. You threw away everything. For what? Some man with a hero complex and a $30,000 salary? No, Mom, I said calmly. For love. For someone who actually sees me. Her voice sharpened like a blade. We raised you better than this. No, I said. You raised me to believe that money was worth more than loyalty. That safety meant obedience. That love was conditional. There was silence on the other end. Then a quiet, deadly statement. You made your choice. Don't come crawling back when it collapses. She hung up. The next few days were quiet, deceptively so. Daniel and I tried to rebuild. We repainted the bedroom. We watched old movies on the couch. We talked, really talked, in ways we hadn't since before the wedding. But there was always a storm cloud looming behind my smile. I knew my parents. And I knew they weren't finished with me. The storm hit exactly 1 week later. I got a letter from my bank. 2 of my accounts had been frozen. I was confused. Then furious. I called the bank, and the representative said the accounts had been flagged due to irregularities and contested ownership. I didn't understand until I realized something horrifying. My parents had set up those accounts in my name. But legally, the original source of funds came from the Whitman Family Trust. And the trust had clauses. Clauses I'd never read. Clauses that let them pull the plug. Our rent bounced the following week. Daniel covered it with his savings, but I saw the worry on his face. We canceled our Vermont plans. We cut expenses. I tried to find more freelance work, but my last name, suddenly worked against me. Whitman doors were closed. One by one, my connections vanished. Emails went unanswered. Invitations stopped. I was persona non grata in the very world I'd been groomed for. Then came the worst blow. Daniel was up for a department commendation, a promotion he'd been working toward for years. A respected city councilman had vouched for him. 3 days before the vote, that endorsement vanished. Daniel was confused, angry, devastated. And then a coworker pulled him aside and said something that changed everything. Word is someone high up made a call. Said you had personal baggage. That your wife was tied to scandal. Or some powerful people didn't want your name next to theirs. Daniel didn't speak for hours after he told me. I sat on the couch, staring at our dusty window, trying not to cry. He stood quietly behind me and said, "They're trying to destroy us." I nodded. "They won't stop." He knelt in front of me and took my hands. "Then we don't stop either." We began again. For real, this time. We sold everything we didn't need. Furniture. Clothes. My designer handbags, all gifts from my mother that I once adored. Gone. We moved to a smaller apartment. Daniel picked up extra shifts. I took a temp job at a print shop downtown. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't easy. But it was ours. And slowly, piece by piece, we found something no check could buy. Peace. 3 months later, I received a final package from the Whitman estate. No return address. No note. Inside was a single photograph. It was a childhood picture of me at the piano, in a pink dress, hands folded perfectly. My mother stood behind me, hands on my shoulders. My father watched from the side, smiling with approval. I stared at it for a long time. Then I lit a match. And watched it burn. 6 months after the last message from my parents, something strange happened. I stopped expecting their calls. At first, their silence had felt like a phantom limb, an ache I couldn't name. I kept waiting for them to come around. To realize they'd gone too far. That I'd made a choice not out of rebellion, but out of love. That never came. Instead, life did. Messy, imperfect, beautiful life. Daniel and I moved into a tiny 2-bedroom above a florist shop that smelled like jasmine in the mornings. The windows leaked when it rained. The heater wheezed like an old man. But it was home. I picked up steady design work from a local business collective. Nothing fancy, but it paid the bills. Daniel got promoted, not at the place that snubbed him, but at a neighboring district's emergency unit that valued hard over headlines. They gave him a badge, a plaque, and the respect he'd long deserved. No one there cared who I was related to. They cared that Daniel once drove 40 miles off-duty to deliver a stranded elderly man to a rural clinic. That he stayed with a trauma victim overnight so she wouldn't be alone. That he still came home and asked me how my day was. My husband wasn't rich. He was priceless. One night, we sat on the rooftop, legs dangling over the edge, a bottle of $10 wine between us. "Do you miss it?" Daniel asked, watching the city flicker beneath us. "Miss what?" "The old life. The money. The parties. The family." I thought about it. "I miss the illusion," I said. "I miss believing they loved me unconditionally." He nodded slowly. "I'm sorry." "Don't be." I took his hand. "They taught me what love isn't." I leaned my head against his shoulder, listening to the hum of traffic below. "They thought they were saving me," I whispered. "But you're the one who did." Months turned into a year. I didn't attend the Whitman Foundation Gala that fall. I wasn't invited. But I saw photos in the local magazine. My parents stood next to a rising real estate mogul. The caption said Whitman family supports local leaders and future son-in-law. They had replaced me. Not in words. In legacy. A perfect daughter who said yes instead of I love him anyway. The following spring, I got a letter. It wasn't from my parents. It was from my younger brother, James. He said he'd quietly left the family fund. That he'd watched everything unfold from behind the curtain, the manipulation, the threats, the money as power game. They told me you were reckless. I see now you were just brave. You were the first one to walk away. Maybe you opened the door for the rest of us. I cried when I read it. Not out of grief. Out of relief. Someone had finally seen what it cost to be free. Daniel and I celebrated our 5th anniversary in a cabin by the lake. No fancy dinner. No orchestra. Just us, a warm fire, and a sky full of stars. He gave me a necklace. Not gold, not diamonds, but a small silver charm shaped like a flame. For the fire in you, he said. The one they tried to put out. I kissed him so hard I knocked the wine over. To outsiders, our life still doesn't look impressive. We don't vacation in Monaco. We don't own a yacht. Our wedding photo doesn't hang in any society column. But we laugh. We argue, then forgive. We build. We survive. And we choose each other, not because it's easy, but because it's real. My family once offered me everything. Except the freedom to choose my own happiness. And now? Now I live every day knowing I paid the price, and would do it again. Because sometimes, walking away from wealth is the richest thing you'll ever do.